Week 2 of the 2024 NFL season was, well, interesting. We're going to break down our biggest takeaways from the weekend that was today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
Happy Victory Monday to those celebrating here post week 2 or week 3 of college football. It's a good weekend of college football as well. Lots of really interesting outcomes. And I don't know if week 2 is going to be a bigger liar than week 1, but certainly felt like some very surprise outcomes across the board, across the NFL.
I feel like the story in the NFL right now is the Saints. I mean, a 44-19 win in Dallas. They mopped the floor with the Panthers in week 1, and we said, it's the Panthers. They went into Dallas, and not that I think Dallas is world beaters, but 44-19. Derek Carr looking like he's playing out of his mind. Clint Kubiak's dialing up the play action. Rashid Shaheed down the field. Alvin Kamara, 4 touchdowns. I mean, I listened to Ross Jackson on Locked On Saints just to kind of gauge what his temperature was, and he's preaching a message that the Saints are for real. And I mean, it's so early in the season, and obviously, I think we forget that every year at this time. You remember teams like even last year, you had a couple of 3-6 teams and a 4-7 team in the NFC make the playoffs. You've seen teams start slow and get it together, but this team is hot out of the gate, and we got to sort out if this team's for real in the NFC South or if this is just, hey, new offense, got to figure it out. Things will normalize. But the Saints are certainly, to me, the story of the NFL through 2 weeks.
Yeah, it swings both ways, too. You think about some teams that had success early in the past couple of years that have not carried it through the season. Like the Bears were 2-1 and beat San Francisco and then finished the number 1 overall pick, right? There's still a lot of deviations that your record is going to take depending on where you sit now and what the final outcome is. But the numbers are pretty jarring as far as 2-0 teams and 0-2 teams and playoff history. I know there's an expanded playoff seed that goes with that, so that makes that probably a little bit more murky than what those numbers historically would suggest. But every game counts for 1/17 of the season.
Right.
And for a team like the Saints, who we had plenty of questions with the offensive line, and I think Clint Kubiak he keeps this up, he's going to be probably the hot name, right? Ben Johnson, little rough start for the Detroit Lions, and Jared Goff, we'll talk about them. Doubled up the yards yesterday, but scored 16 points and lost.
Jared Goff wasn't having it. He said, we're not going to win this football game. That's what he said.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
So yeah, I think the Saints are a great place to start because what they have been able to do amidst the questions of the offensive line has obviously yielded 2 40-point performances and a ton of explosive plays. And they play in a division where we'll find out a little bit more about Atlanta tonight against Philadelphia, but they didn't look good in the first week or the week 1 game that they had. And Carolina obviously looks like they might be the worst team in football again this year. So that division with Tampa and with New Orleans, those teams are cooking with gas right now. And the question is how much of it is sustainable throughout the personnel limitations that both teams respectively have.
You mentioned the expanded playoff field to 14 teams. That happened in 2020. And so here's the updated metric for 0-2 teams.
2021?
It's 2020. So since the NFL playoffs expanded to 14 teams in 2020, 32 franchises have started 0-2. Only 2 of those 32 teams 6.25% made the postseason. It was Cincinnati in 2022, Houston in 2023. So still not great odds even for the expanded playoff field.
So I've refigured out the Joe Burrow stat.
Okay.
I know I referenced it after the week 1 game, and they obviously look bad. But it was, I said like 1-8 in September. He's not 1-8 in September. He was 1-8 in weeks 1 and 2. And we'll get to Cincinnati because they played a banger of a game yesterday at 425 in Arrowhead. But teams putting themselves in big holes right now is very jarring, and teams that you wouldn't expect to be 0-2, like the Baltimore Ravens, like the LA Rams. The Rams, one of 2 0-2 teams in the NFC right now, and got smacked by the Cardinals. They got ran out the building by the Cardinals. And I know they're banged up, but the Cardinals put up 41 points. Marvin Harrison, some Kyler explosive plays. I think the pass rush for them was really limiting to get home for Kyler, and that led to outside of structure stuff. Elijah Higgins with a big touchdown on an extended play. I know you texted me yesterday as far as like the questions that we had with the Rams and their defense, and they had a very admirable performance in week 1, but this was, I think, maybe some of what you were afraid they might look like defensively in week 2.
They're overmatched, and they're overmatched by a team offensively in Arizona that I think has got reasonable personnel, but they're not a juggernaut, man. You know, like there's more talented skill players and skill groups that exist in the NFL, but it was certainly a situation where, like you said, Kyler was able to really dice them up down the field, extending plays and exposing a lot of that defense, whether it was a lack of rush up front or a lot of new pieces in the back 7, maybe some expired pieces in that back 7 that couldn't match up, and they were hanging on for dear life. And, you know, the Rams have faced a lot of, I mean, what's the word? Adversity early in the season with their injuries, attrition with their injuries. And they showed a lot more fight against Detroit in week 1 than we thought. But boy, they got mollywopped by Arizona. And then you kind of look at Detroit and some of their own issues that they had against Tampa Bay. And obviously there's still a lot to learn about these football teams.
Yeah. Arizona finished 40 rushes for 231 yards on the ground. They'll do that to some teams.
Not Tennessee versus Kent State, man. This is the National Football League, right?
Right.
NFC. How about the Vikings? 2-0. 2-0 Minnesota Vikings.
What's their secret with San Francisco? Have you seen kind of the head-to-head history here?
It's all time too. It's recent and it's all time. It's unbelievable. I've never heard. This is the most strange, lopsided thing in the league that you just don't expect to be the case. So I thought they were going to cover. I had money on them covering. I think they were going to win the game. They won the game.
So Minnesota won last year 22-17. They win this year 23-17. Could have been worse than that. Aaron Jones has a fumble down in scoring territory.
Right. That game was almost on ice.
Yep. And San Francisco hasn't won in Minnesota since I believe 1992. December 13th, 1992, 20-17 is the last time the San Francisco 49ers won in Minnesota.
What? Right? Like, what?
All-time weird. And every team has that, right? Like that one team or that one stadium that's just like, yeah, we don't play well there. We don't travel well there. We don't. And apparently Minnesota the last 2 years and going all the way back to 92 is the kryptonite for the San Francisco 49ers.
So plenty of interesting things in the NFC. We're going to shift gears to the AFC on the other side of it, folks. Be sure to stick with us. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy, so that way your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. And PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get money in as quick as 15 minutes. So download the PrizePicks app and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly When you play $5, you don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Game days around my house are pretty busy. We got 2 young kids and kind of hard to find some time to cook or get to the grocery store. Well, that's when DoorDash comes into play for us. They are phenomenal. It's an unbelievably convenient service. I mean, it's a food delivery app that brings me food from my favorite national and local restaurants right to my front door. I kid you not, yesterday during the games, the 1 o'clock slate, the smoke detector battery in my office was going off. And you think I had 9-volt batteries sitting in the drawer? No chance. No chance of that. But you know what? CVS has them. And I just went to DoorDash and had them delivered right to my house. I was able to get that battery switched out and didn't have to listen to the chirping anymore. So check it out. Use our promo code LOCKEDFALL24 for 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. Limited time offer. Terms apply. Promo code is not valid for orders containing alcohol. DoorDash, your door to game day greatness, your door to more. Download the DoorDash app now to order your game day favorites. Must be 21 or older to order alcohol. Drink responsibly. Alcohol only available in select markets.
AFC, just got done talking about oddities and divisions and records and 0-2. How about the 0-4 combined Cincinnati Bengals and Baltimore Ravens? What is the deal with the Baltimore Ravens and double-digit leads?
You see the stat on this?
Games?
The most over the last 5 years,
Yes.
blowing 7 points.
An unbelievable amount of like multi-score blown leads.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can speak to the ones that I watch, but it's like, to me, their defense starts giving up big plays. They have a costly turnover and they wind up losing. But you just don't expect that for a team that has a great head coach and, 2-time NFL MVP and Lamar Jackson at quarterback. But they've seen some leads evaporate from them. And this game, pretty concerning, losing to the Raiders. And I don't think in a game that the Raiders played particularly well. But I think you saw some more offensive line issues pop up for.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Right. Big time problem.
Baltimore also finished with 11 penalties for 109 yards in this game as well. But the Daniel Fa'alele experience at right guard is not going well. You're a little more sympathetic against Kansas City, right? Because Chris Jones is there. But even Macari and Rosengarten kind of rotating at right tackle, Andrew Voorhees at left guard. A lot of underwhelming play up front, and it's a worst case scenario for a Baltimore team that came in and made the changes, but paid Derrick Henry, and he was bottled up for much of this game, kind of got a couple chunk runs later in the game. But I don't know, where'd Isaiah Likely go after the big performance that he had week 1? He finishes with just 3 targets, excuse me. And one of those 3 targets was a very low percentage play down at the end of game sequence.
End of game,
yeah. And Lamar, how likely do you think Lamar had a better chance of shaking those 2 or 3 defenders in the open field or scoring on the lateral that he chose to lateral?
It's hard to go back to that play and wonder, but I do agree with you that I think he made the wrong decision in that moment. Like, dude, you're Lamar, man. You make people miss like crazy. You had nothing but space. Like, keep that rock in your hand.
Space and speed. Yeah.
So try that. Or like the other alternative was back across the field to Zay Flowers. But obviously so much goes into the game besides that. But it certainly didn't feel like that was their best chance to score on that particular play.
So I don't want to push the panic button too hard on Baltimore because the body of work with Harbaugh speaks for itself. The Ravens did have 11 penalties for 109 yards. The Raiders ran the ball 17 times for 27 yards.
Yeah.
And had 260 yards of offense. Like, this one feels like a week 2 liar to me, but now you're sitting at 0-2.
0-2, and they got at Dallas next. Well, we'll find out, right?
Buffalo.
And they host the Bills at Cincy, Washington at Tampa, at Cleveland. They got to stack up some wins here. And these next 3, I think, is like Dallas, Buffalo, Cincy.
Ideally, you got to get 2. I mean,
I think so.
If you're 1-4 in that stretch, you've left yourself very little margin for error. Now, I think the schedule does kind of soften up, but they still have to play at Houston. They have to play Philly. They have to play at Pittsburgh. Obviously, it's a divisional game. They have to play at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's playing good ball right now.
Yeah.
So there's still some tough ones in there where if you're sitting at 1-4, you got those road games looming. It's not a lot of margin for error.
Bengals
Who's more likely is the 0-2 NFC North teams to make the playoffs, Baltimore or Cincinnati?
Cincinnati's kind of been in this hole, right? We just talked about it. They're one of the two teams that have done it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the way they competed against Kansas City helps. Which team has bigger fatal flaws? It's probably the Ravens offensive line, right?
I would assume so. It's can Cincinnati get their wide receiver room healthy? I mean, the defense has yielded 290 and 286 yards in the last 2 weeks, and they played in Arrowhead in one of those two games. They had 3 turnovers on Pat. They know how to push his buttons. You give credit where credit's due there.
They do. I guess I feel a little bit better about Cincinnati, I guess. Meanwhile, Steelers.
Are you not worried about
I'm worried about all of it, Kyle, but one of them's got to be the right answer, right? Do you believe more in Baltimore?
I think I believe more in Baltimore because Cincinnati, they can't defend the run and they can't run the ball.
Concerning stuff.
Right? 70 and 74 yards against New England and Kansas City rushing the ball, and you've given up 170 and 149. And you knew that was weakness coming in.
Maybe it's just the Steelers division, and we need to acknowledge that.
I don't know. Is Justin Fields going to play like he did yesterday the whole season? Because if they do and they leave him in there, I think they got a shot.
Right, at least the first
half,
enough
Justin
games. Fields, right? What do you trust from Cleveland? Nothing, right?
Nothing. Yeah.
Jaguars just pooped their pants situationally once again.
Yeah, the Doug Peterson situation feels like it's getting a little volatile there. When Trevor Lawrence is at his post-game press conference and comes out and says, "We suck right now." And I forget, was it ETN said, "We don't need talent, we need hard workers." Doug said they had a talented team. And ETN
they do.
Said, "We need hard workers." They do have a talented team. I think that's what makes it really frustrating. Jaguars fans should probably want to be more one of the more frustrated fan bases in football with how these two games have played out for them to start the season.
Yeah, you got to optimize the talent. Doesn't feel like this offensively, right? They're not. It's hard to be too critical of the defense. I feel like they've played well enough to win the last 2 games, but offensively, they're not executing situationally. Trevor Lawrence, 14 to 30. Come on, man.
Yeah.
In perfect conditions.
And was 11 to 16 or something for 16 yards in the first half.
Yeah, what are we doing?
Crazy.
I mean, obviously, they lose Bigsby, Ingram pregame injury, but I mean, Christian Kirk can't get going. 1 catch for -1 yards on 3 targets. What do you have? 1 catch last week?
Right. Ingram goes down in the pregame. It's just when it rains, it pours for them.
Boy.
And it was a lot of situational stuff, which will just drive you crazy.
Speaking of situational stuff, how about Mr. Will Levis and the Tennessee Titans?
I think every single one of us was Brian Callahan in that moment. I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
What are you doing? And that is the PG, family-friendly, locked-on-friendly version of what Brian Callahan asked Will Levis coming off the field in scoring territory on a 3rd down to scramble outside the pocket, turn to his left, underhand, backwards, lateral, bocce ball roll one to his outlet. Turnover, fumble. What?
And then
what is happening?
Is that back-to-back weeks they've had a punt blocked as well?
Yes.
Boy, that's tough, man. 2 tight losses, right?
That's another team that should feel very frustrated because I thought for much of the game against the Jets, they outplayed the Jets.
Right. I thought Tyler Rowland, the host of Locked On Titans, summed it up well. Mind-numbing mistakes on offense, a special teams blunder, and eventually the defense wears out and gives up, right? Late in the game.
You have block punts in each of the first 2 games, and you're -2 in the turnover differential in each of the first 2 games.
And you had 2 one-score losses. You should be getting killed.
Yeah. And your defense gave up 148 yards and 265 yards and lost both games.
All right. On the other side of it, we're going to get into some lingering questions. They're all running through our head right now. We'll talk about them here on the other side of it. Be sure to stick with us. Folks, maybe you want to get to a game this year or you want to get to a comedy event. Well, that could be a stressful process to get tickets, but doesn't have to be if you have the Gametime app. Gametime is the fast and easy way to purchase tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. I love the app. It's easy to navigate. They give you flash deals. They give you a seat view. You can look at the prices as all in, but I love the last-minute ticket specials. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go to a hockey game in 2 months from now. I don't know if I'm going to go to a concert in 3 months, but I can make that choice right up into the day of the event where they specialize in those last-minute tickets. So check it out. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Let's talk rookie quarterbacks, because we got some stinkers early on, including Caleb Williams, who they scored 13 points last night against Houston under heavy duress yet again.
Boy, that Darnell Wright, that sack he gave up to Neil Hunter was about one of the worst pass sets I've ever seen in my life. Boy, he was twisted up.
He's a great run blocker, but that was always kind of the pass protection elements. I thought with Darnell Wright, I thought maybe sometimes he got a little bit too much credit for blocking Will Anderson in a 4-eye.
Right, your hands on, you're not going anywhere, right?
Right. Yeah. He's like, oh, okay, yeah. But Chicago, 148 and 205 yards of total offense, first two games. Caleb, what was the stat from an EPA standpoint?
Austin Gell has brought to our attention that Caleb Williams, 3 net yards per attempt is the worst for any quarterback in weeks 1 and 2 in the last 10 years.
3 yards per attempt?
3 net yards per attempt.
Or the last 2 weeks combined.
Yep.
Man.
Week 1, they said, this is what they said. Oh, well, Caleb Williams is playing like he was back at USC. Week 2, that's like, oh, well, let's get the ball out of his hands quickly. Now, look, this has got to play out, right? Like, there's so much opportunity ahead of these players that nobody's career is defined after 2 games. But I will say this. I think my overarching thought in seeing Caleb Williams and Bo Nix really struggle, and I think Jaden Daniels has been clearly the best rookie quarterback. But you think about
he got banged up, though.
Well, he's taken a million hits, right? So that's
right.
a big concern with a 190-pound quarterback.
Like, can you learn how to protect yourself?
No, the answer to that is no.
The pre-existing narrative, just like I think you're going to go with Bo and Caleb Williams, the question that those guys had, I think we've seen it with all the guys that are playing right now.
Yeah, well, I think over the last, 3-4 years of just not seeing good rookie quarterback play, doesn't that really say a lot about C.J. Stroud and what he's been able to do very quickly? And like even Purdy, like these guys being able to come in and play at a reasonable level. I think we got spoiled there for a while with some of these guys that were able to come in and be good, but that curve feels like it's back in a big way. And again, there's nobody's career is defined right now, but you have to be discouraged by a lot of this.
Okay, so can we expand this to Bryce Young and look at the last 2 number 1 overall picks?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what they did at college. I think Bryce got a lot of compliments for his anticipatory abilities, but I don't know that I would have described him as an anticipatory operator of the offense. Is that a fair state? Like, he's capable of throwing early into routes to guys and throwing with accuracy, but he held the ball a long time.
Right.
He liked to create outside of structure and make things happen.
Right.
And now you have Caleb Williams coming in and looking to be an outside of structure creator. And then their adjustment to that is get the ball out of his hands fast. And obviously it's all quick. What do you think it says that those two guys, and Caleb's got an electric arm. There's no question about the arm talent. But as outside of structure players that don't necessarily have elite athletic ability, like, is it too soon to look at that and ask a question? Is it too soon to at least put it on the list of like, hey, I kind of want to see how this plays out for future reference? If we're going to sit here and romanticize guys who can win outside of structure, you better be a good enough athlete to do it at the next level.
Or there's the Jordan Love plan, right? Where he took time, and we still got a lot to learn about Jordan Love. Or look at Josh Allen. How long did that take for him to be a reasonable in-structure player? Like, the reality is you can teach the in-structure stuff, but it doesn't necessarily come right away. Look at Zach Wilson. Mm-hmm. Nobody praised Zach Wilson because for what he did in structure. He did crazy things outside of structure. Yeah, I think it's absolutely relevant.
And the successful early rookie quarterbacks we've had over the last few years, you mentioned Brock Purdy and CJ Stroud. What are they known for?
Running the offense.
And I know everybody's fallen in love with kind of the extended playability, and there's no greater EPA than quarterbacks who can get outside of structure and win on extended plays, because for the vast majority of quarterbacks, those plays are dead, but it cuts both ways. And I think for guys that are learning how to harness their ability, it's a big question that I have, as Caleb for 2 straight weeks has not lived up to, I think, some of the potential that a lot of people thought the offense has. And as Bryce Young continues to look like an unplayable quarterback at the NFL level. And everybody wants to know, like, is it time to sit down Bryce Young? I saw one of my colleagues at the 33rd team put that story up yesterday. I know Sam Monson weighed in on their Check the Mic podcast with him and Steve Palazzolo. It's point of no return if that happens, right? Like, he's done in Carolina if you sit him down. You might get an injury and then he has to play again, but you're acknowledging the door is closed to long-term success if you sit him down.
Yeah, there's no coming back from benching, but also I almost think you have to play him for the simple fact of what you've given up to acquire him. Like, you have to give him every opportunity to play, and not only show that he can't play, but prove to your fan base that he's not a viable option. It's complicated, man, but like, I don't think that people were honest about the projection to the NFL. And I think we're seeing that manifest itself right before our eyes.
What other questions do you have?
I mean, what are you making of Seattle being 2-0?
I give them credit for winning games. You look at who they beat. I think they're still a team that you want to see more from. They're going to get the Skylar Thompson Dolphins in week 3 at home. I don't know that I don't have any reason to believe that they're not going to win that game. So at the end of the day, stacking wins, I don't think it matters until you get to the time of year in which it matters that you need to beat good teams. So good for you guys. Keep putting up points. I mean, Jackson Smith-Njigba and DK Metcalf went off yesterday against the Patriots. And obviously what they know they're good for is their ability to play defense, and Christian Gonzalez and looked like he had a good day from what I had seen, from what I saw from the game, but they have enough weapons that they can really put you in a bind. And good for Geno Smith for negotiating. Keon White was very disruptive yesterday for them against that offensive line.
Great start, Keon White.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think they deserve credit for winning their matchups and getting enough points to outscore the teams and find themselves at 2-0.
The only other team I wanted to bring up today was the Colts. They're 0-2, and Anthony Richardson's not playing well. Like, if you watch the one throw that he made, yeah, it was special, jaw on the floor, but there's a whole lot more than just that. Completing less than 50% of his passes to this point. Not a lot of production, inefficient. I mean, Shane Steichen was able to get a lot out of this offense last year with Gardner Minshew and lesser supporting cast, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like where this is trending. You just lost 16-10 to the Malik Willis Packers,
who passed the ball 16 times.
Right. I think he completed like 14 of them. Was one of the weirdest
Yeah.
box scores.
Yeah.
It was 12 of 14 for 122 yards.
Yeah.
Josh Jacobs, they ran him. I mean, the 53 rushes for 261 yards.
Did you see the Josh Myers puke on the ball incident?
Yeah, that's insane. Could you
And did
imagine
you hear
that?
what LaFleur had said about it after the game?
Yes.
I asked Malik why he didn't throw that ball. He said Josh Myers puked on it, so he couldn't throw it.
Could you imagine that? That's the weirdest. That's a weird situation.
I mean, but that's the kind of thing, like, if you're somebody in our shoes or you're somebody in football media and you sit down and you do film study and you look at the back end view and you're like, he's open. I don't get why he didn't throw the ball. It's like, yeah, you need to talk to Malik,
bro,
because the center puked on the ball 2 seconds before he shotgun snapped back to him.
Boy, that's tough.
Like, what do you say to that? You're like, yeah, okay, I get it. We'll get you.
If you're Josh Myers, you got to lean to the left or right, right? You can't just go right on the ball.
Right.
I don't know. I'm not a great. I don't puke a lot, so I don't know what it's like to control it. So, but that's tough, man. Colts are in trouble though. 0-2. Titans 0-2.
And I think have to be very discouraged by what Anthony Richardson looks like with the second longest average time to throw, with his athletic ability, sub 50% completion percentage, 3 interceptions, and some of them you're like, what do we see here? So, and that was another quarterback that kind of got drafted on the prowess of being a mismatch type player. And I think they really need to play him. But then you're into, for a player like that, he had the injuries last year. So how much do you use? What was the added element of his game for fear of protecting him, not getting him hurt? That's a very challenging one to negotiate or to navigate for me.
I'm good.
All right. That's going to do it for us here today on Locked On NFL Scouting. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He is Joe Marino. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Make it a great rest of your day. We are out of here.